Alright, we're back at the shop today, and for those that you don't know, I do quite a bit of volunteer work. This is one of those times. This is actually a local rescue squad, ATV or UTV, that I've been at for quite a while, and we've just been going through a couple of them and kind of making them bulletproof. We do use them a lot in life-saving operations. This particular one has done many calls at a local ATV park, logging projects, landslides. I mean, you name it, this thing's been there. I think the last upgrade that we did to it, we actually replaced the springs with a set of heavy-duty springs. And what I'm going to be doing today, we have a lot of different people driving these, and belts have always been a problem in this unit. So what we're going to be installing today is a Duraclutch. Probably the most unique thing about UTVs and rescue is it's been a few years ago, but as a department we actually purchased a big military 6x6 to haul these, and it's the extended, it's a newer 5-ton. It's not the Stewart and Stevenson, but it's the basically it's the truck that they use for communications, which has a longer bed. I think it's around 20 feet, and there's actually 2 of these loaded in the back of that truck, and I'll cut to a shot of that just to show you. And there's a big set of aluminum ramps that we had custom made to get these in and out, and they also have the ice cleats on the ramps, because a lot of times we use this in the winter to kind of get around or get folks in and out of bad places. But today's video is basically going to be a Duraclutch install. There's a lot of videos on installing Duraclutches. This particular UTV is a Polaris XP. I believe this is a 900. So this is pretty applicable to basically any Duraclutch install. But I wanted to touch on why you would want to install one of these, especially for this application. This is a low-speed UTV. Typically, it's used in really rough terrain. So these aren't really used, you know, to go out on highways or anything like that. If this is being used, it's because a normal vehicle can't get into that location. With that being said, and knowing that a lot of more novice drivers actually end up driving this, the reason the belt gets eat up is because they, you know, will idle up just a tad bit to where it's engaging the belt, but the ATV is not actually moving. The Duraclutch has a lot more smooth engagement, and it's more natural feeling for, you know, low speed crawling around, which is what this is used for. It just provides a more bulletproof way of motivating this vehicle. And again, you know, none of my videos are like paid endorsements. This particular video, the department purchased retail a Duraclutch and asked me to install it, so that's why I'm videoing it. So well, I'm going to get started here. These are pretty simple, and this is pretty standard on any of the UTV/razors. Is you basically pop off any of your tubes and basically take the clutch cover off. You will need a clutch tool, and you do need a torque wrench that goes fairly high to put the primary back on. But I'm going to get this popped off real quick, and we'll get it replaced. These are pretty hard to get to. One of the things is right down at the bottom, this factual frame rail kind of juts up past the clutch cover. I'm going to take it off a lot of them with a ratchet, but this is a go-to tool. I have this in my razor. These are a little bit different size than a razor. This is actually a 3/8. If you can, the one that I have for the razor actually fits. This end flips around, I just tape it on, but you can actually get the hose clamp and the clutch cover with one tool, and that makes it really easy. One thing that makes the clutch cover a lot easier to get out is actually remove the storage bin. To do that, all you have to do is just pull out the seat, pull the storage bin up. Give it a little bit more work to get this out. And as with all clutch covers, try to clean up all of this inside. You don't want to use anything that's going to leave a residue. So you want to use something like a rag and air, if at all possible. A lot of times I'll use acetone to actually clean the sheaves. The clutch material is pretty abrasive, so the more of it that you can get out, the longer your clutch and belt will last. And I'm not recommending that you use air tools on these clutches. I do it all the time, never had a problem. If you're not really experienced, you may want to use a breaker bar. This one in particular has got a lot more torque on it. This will usually come off pretty easy. The main reason I like using air tool is just you don't have to basically stick something up in here. Now on this particular one, we're not reusing this clutch, so it really doesn't matter. And it's pretty worn. Spacers are pretty much shot. The towers are, I can actually even feel a groove in the towers, which probably explains why this has really rough engagement. You can't really tell when it's going to engage. And the Duraclutch is going to solve that issue. This may be wishful thinking. It doesn't always work. But I do have a larger tool if it comes down to it. That one come off really easy. And this is what you'll want to use. I think this is the right one. I have one that I use for the razor, which I don't think works on this. But the department got a puller for their ATVs. This is supposed to be the right one. This one comes dry. A lot of them will come with like a lubrication on these threads. You want to use it, but you want to use it sparingly. A lot of times you end up having to put a little bit of grease on the tip here to hydraulically press that out. You want to be really sparingly putting that on, because whatever you put on you have to clean up. You don't want any grease in this thing when you're done. You don't want any grease anywhere around these clutches or belts. Okay, I put a dry film lubricant on these threads. It's high pressure. I don't really go real hard using that method. So basically, if this doesn't come off, I'm going to pull this back out and start over. It's kind of like a multi-step process. And it looks like that's going to work. So I basically try to use the dry lube first. I don't put a lot of pressure on the threads. If it doesn't come off, we'll step up to some grease and add a little bit more pressure. And if that doesn't work, we'll actually, add a little grease to the tip and try to hydraulically press it out. And that one came right off, no issues. Here's the primary off. Primary actually doesn't look that bad. But what's happened to, in other words, the sheave What's happened, if you can see there, just tons and tons of belt dust has got up there. I don't know if you can see the shock tower or not, but it's wore these shock towers down. And there's quite a bit of slop. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but that's quite a bit of slop in a clutch. The bearing rolls nice. So it looks like basically what's eat this clutch up is just belt dust getting up into the clutch and on the towers. And usually you can just tap on these secondaries a bit and pull, and they'll come off. This one's been a little less than cooperative. Slowly but surely. Yeah, the shaft on this one's pretty rusted up. So I want to clean that off, and I'll probably just put just a little bare minimum of anti-seize on those splines before I put this back together. This is a pretty interesting design on these. It's drastically different. These are the rapid response clutches, a rapid reaction. You just want to clean any kind of residue that may be there. If you didn't have to use grease, usually I'll just kind of put the, you don't want to get a lot of solvents on these plastics. You can help it. And you can kind of see there how nasty the inside is. Get rid of all that belt dust. The Duraclutch is not infallible, so you want to make sure that you're you want kind of the same maintenance. The only difference is you're not going to be really changing the clutch that much, but you do want to go in and make sure that you're still taking care of any belt dust. It does have basically its metal pads that are springing out. Kind of similar if you've ever seen a go-kart or a chainsaw. It's basically centrifugal pads that come out and rub against the hub. So you don't really want a lot of things gritty in there. And this belt material is pretty abrasive. Okay, on this particular installation, Duraclutch actually provides a torque stop bracket, which is basically something that is a rubber stopper mount that gets between the engine and the transmission. Apparently things happen and if you have a really heavy load or what have you, it'll actually shorten or elongate the distance between the clutch and cause the belt to actually slip. So we're going to go ahead and install that, and to do that we actually end up having to take this back cover off. And it is an optional thing, but in this particular application we're wanting something bulletproof. We do like engine braking, and we really don't want the characteristics of how the clutch engages to change just because of loads or downhill descent or heavy uphill descent. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that while we're in there. Okay, we have the clutch cover off, and now we're going to install the bump stop. This is a piece. It's really simple. Basically it's going to go where the existing bolts go. And we're just probably going to trim out just a little bit of this hose. You don't need to remove it. And tighten that up against the engine. And that's it installed. A little bit tough. You got to do a little bit of prying to get everything lined back up. Basically, I'm going to trim out a little bit of this hose. One thing I wanted to note, you actually don't want to get this too tight. It should actually be loose. It should not be touching the motor. at idle. If you do actually tighten that up, you're going to transmit a lot of vibration. So basically I bumped it up, backed it off to where there's a little bit of probably about an 1/8 inch gap. And now I'm going to tighten down the nut. Okay, we're just going to throw this rear cover back on now. One thing I wanted to mention is these bolts that have the small seals, make sure you retain the seals. And also these are self-tapping, so you want to be real careful when you thread those back in and make sure they go in straight. And they're really tough to get off. These in particular had a little bit of oxidation on the back side, and they didn't twist out real well. So be careful you don't snap one of those off in the end of the transmission. Okay, we're ready to put the secondary on. Just going to show you a quick peek at it. It's pretty drastically different. It's a round roller style machine, and it actually has the what you typically see, which is a helical plate on the back. A little bit better sealing. That one was pretty much open. There was a big surface area that could get junk on it. This one doesn't have as much. But it basically goes back on just like it came off. I usually like putting the secondary on first, and then I'll actually put the primary and belt on at the same time. Okay, we're going to tighten down the secondary here. These do come with a new belt, and I've always just got in the habit of however it goes on the machine. This one's got made in the USA, so I want to make sure that that writing is facing in that direction. I always make sure that I can read it that way. If I ever do take a belt off or do something, I never put it back on running in the opposite direction. There's a little bit of special sauce that goes with this. You do have to remove some of the parts to make sure that you're paying attention to the instructions. And on this one, it's basically use their washer setup. Take all the other washers off. You still maintain the OEM plastic piece, and it should look like that. Okay, we got everything together. I'm going to give it a quick try just sitting here. Just when you're doing this, make sure that you're actually either in or mashing on the brake in case this thing's locked up. You know, we don't really want it to take off. And as you can see, the sheave, the rear sheave's not turning. So there's no friction on the belt. When I rev this up, it'll actually engage. So that belt is constantly engaged with the sheave. And this is really hard to do out in the trail. But if you'll actually get up in there and press and push that clutch cover, you can feel it go in and seal up. And that's what you want. If you ever put one of these on and then drove through water and realize that there's a problem, usually it's because you didn't get your clutch cover on straight. Okay, that's the clutch cover back on. I've got some stuff to clean up. I'm going to get this boot back on and get this tight. We'll take it out and take it for a spin and see how it does. Okay, this thing works pretty good. I'm going to just do a quick demonstration. I notice a lot better engine braking, and basically what that means is there's really no slippage. If you have the engine just barely off idle, you can just crawl down a hill. I don't know how much that's going to translate through. The predictability of the clutch is is very predictable. Where before it was kind of, you know, if the helical slid out really fast, or you know, you had a little bit of clutch grab, you really didn't know when it was actually going to take off and grab. This thing is butter smooth. I'm just going to kind of drive it around this area. Let's take a look at it. I don't know that you'll be able to tell much difference unless you actually own one of these. But it's night and day as far as if you want to get this machine into really tight places or up really rough sections, which this thing routinely does. I don't think the extra weight, obviously, with it doing full engagement, is not going to wear out as quickly or suddenly fail like a belt normally fails. Okay, that really slow operation there on the old belt, it would kind of jump, especially if you got it really close to off idle. It's butter smooth now. You can go up over obstacles. I took it up the hill over here, and it basically went all the way up. And what really surprised me is when I put it in reverse and started to back down, I had solid engine braking. I didn't have to use the brake at all on a really steep incline. Anyway, I'm gonna get this loaded back up